The notification pinged just as the waiter placed the birthday cake in front of me. "You're not our priority right now." I stared at my phone, heart sinking. My parents. My own parents. The people who had always promised me love, support, and presents on my birthday had just told me, in the coldest words imaginable, that I didn't matter. I'm Zia, and this was supposed to be a celebration. My 21st birthday. A small, cozy dinner at my favorite restaurant, a table decorated with candles and balloons, surrounded by friends and family. The waiter smiled politely as I tried to smile back, but my hand shook as I set the phone down. Across the table, my parents, my father and mother, were scrolling on their own phones, barely looking up, barely acknowledging me. My mom sipped her wine while texting someone else. My dad laughed at something on his screen. No happy birthday. No I love you. Just silence punctuated by the occasional ping from their devices. Growing up, they had always been a mix of warm gestures and cold indifference. Praise was rare, criticism was frequent. Milestones were sometimes celebrated, sometimes ignored. But this felt different. Cruel. Intentional. I tried to push it away, telling myself, maybe they're busy. Maybe it's just work. Maybe it's nothing. But deep down, I felt the sting of betrayal. And the unease settled in my chest like a stone I couldn't swallow. My friends exchanged awkward glances. They didn't know what to do. Some whispered words of encouragement, trying to salvage the night, but even their kind eyes couldn't erase the cold realization. The people who were supposed to be my greatest supporters had chosen everything and everyone over me, on my birthday. I thought about the countless times I had gone out of my way for them, remembering their birthdays, helping with errands, celebrating their milestones. Every sacrifice, every thoughtful gesture, every time I put myself second, and now, the message on my phone made it clear that my presence, my feelings, my day, didn't even register. Something inside me shifted, though I didn't yet understand it. A quiet, simmering thought that maybe this wasn't just carelessness. Maybe it was deliberate. Maybe this dinner, this night, was a test, or worse, a message. I picked up my pen and a small card from my bag. My fingers trembled as I began to write. Not out of despair, but because the first spark of something else was forming, resolve. They had told me I wasn't their priority. Fine. But tonight, I would make sure they remembered that neglect has consequences. Even as I wrote, a subtle tension filled the air, a warning I couldn't shake. This birthday wasn't just a celebration. It was the beginning of a reckoning. The day after my birthday dinner, I tried to shake off the sting, but little things began stacking up like warnings I couldn't ignore. First, the texts. They weren't just cold, they were selective. My cousin had sent me a picture from the same dinner, and my parents had replied immediately, gushing about her new promotion, her achievements. But when I checked my own messages, silence. A subtle pattern, but it hit like a slap. Favoritism, I realized. Not random neglect. Then came the secretive phone calls. I overheard my mother talking in hushed tones while I waited in the living room. Words like, "we'll handle it quietly" and "don't let him find out yet" floated through the door. My father, too, slipped away to make calls that ended abruptly whenever I walked into the room. Each time, their casual smiles didn't match their hurried whispers. Even money started feeling like a weapon. I noticed my allowance had been cut without explanation, and yet there were sudden splurges on gifts for my younger cousin, extravagant purchases I hadn't been privy to. When I asked politely, the responses were vague, dismissive. "It's just how things are right now," my mother said, with that effortless air of superiority that made me feel small. And the emotional strain, oh, that was relentless. I tried to confront them gently about the birthday text, about how hurt I felt. My father brushed me off, his voice low and measured. "We're busy, Zia. You'll understand when you're older." Understanding wasn't the point. Respect wasn't the point. Acknowledge me, even briefly, that was the point. But no, they had trained me, subtly, over years, to doubt my own feelings, to question my perception of their behavior. Even my friends noticed the tension. When I mentioned the messages, they hesitated, unsure how to respond. Some suggested maybe I'd misunderstood. Some asked if I'd overreacted. I wanted to scream, but instead, I nodded quietly, letting their words sink into me, feeding the gnawing uncertainty. And then there were the little manipulations. Invitations to family gatherings came late, if at all, always with an excuse for why I was last to know. Praise for my accomplishments was lukewarm, often overshadowed by attention to my siblings' trivial victories. Even casual comments felt loaded, like tests I hadn't passed. Every small act, every whispered conversation, every tiny exclusion chipped away at my confidence. I felt trapped between doubt and anger, hurt and suspicion. Was it just negligence, or something deeper? I couldn't tell. But one thing I knew for certain, the night of my birthday had been no accident. It had been the first unmistakable sign that something was shifting in our family dynamic, something that put me on the outside, even in the company of my own parents. And as the unease settled in, I realized that this was just the beginning. It wasn't until a week later that the full scope of their betrayal hit me, and it hit like a truck. I had been going through old family documents, trying to make sense of the strange behavior, the favoritism, the secretive calls, and the unexplained cuts to my allowance. That's when I found it, a series of bank transfers and signed papers that made my stomach turn. My parents had been quietly redirecting a significant portion of the trust fund my grandparents had left me, money I had assumed would secure my future. Instead, it was vanishing into accounts under my siblings' names, managed by my parents. Every dollar I had expected to count on for education, savings, or even starting my own small business had been siphoned away. And all the while, they treated me as if my presence, my feelings, and my birthday didn't matter. I read the documents again, unwilling to believe what I saw. My parents, the people I trusted most, had not only dismissed me on my birthday, but they had deliberately planned to rob me of what was rightfully mine. It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't oversight. It was intentional. Every text, every cold gesture, every whispered conversation now made sense. They had been testing me, manipulating me, all while they quietly stole my inheritance. Anger and heartbreak collided inside me. My chest tightened, my hands shook, and for a moment, I couldn't breathe. I felt disbelief, betrayal, and a raw, burning fury all at once. How could they do this? How could the people who had raised me, who had promised to care for me, treat me like I was disposable? I thought about confronting them immediately, screaming at them for their cruelty. But a small, sharp voice inside my head stopped me. If you react now, you lose. You have to be smarter than them. And that's when the idea began to form, the first flicker of a plan. They had underestimated me. They assumed that hurt and humiliation would paralyze me, make me compliant, make me vanish quietly. But they had miscalculated. I could feel the fire building, steady and controlled. The betrayal was monumental, yes, but so was the opportunity. They had exposed themselves completely, cold, greedy, arrogant, and careless. Every transaction, every forged signature, every whispered justification left a trail. A trail I could follow. A trail I could use. And the best part? They still didn't realize I knew. I sat there, the papers spread around me, my birthday cake forgotten and my phone ignored, as the initial heartbreak settled into something sharper, more precise. This was no longer about feeling small. This was about reclaiming what was mine, and making sure they felt the weight of their betrayal in return. The countdown had begun. I sat in my room that night, surrounded by the papers that had exposed everything, bank statements, signed documents, and transaction histories. The betrayal was raw, sharp, and suffocating. I felt small, powerless, and angry, and for a moment, I let the despair take over. But then I looked around at the life I had built for myself. The small apartment I had rented, the books stacked on my desk, the plans I had quietly made for the future, they weren't dependent on anyone else. My parents had tried to convince me that I was insignificant, that my feelings didn't matter. And yet here I was, holding the evidence of their greed and manipulation. Something inside me shifted. Hurt turned to clarity. Anger became focus. I realized that their betrayal, as painful as it was, had given me something I hadn't seen before, the power to take control. They thought they could humiliate me, push me aside, and claim my inheritance without consequence. They thought I would accept their treatment silently. They were wrong. The trigger moment came when I reread the text they had sent me on my birthday. "You're not our priority right now." Their words were meant to diminish me, to make me feel unimportant. But now, I saw them differently. They weren't just cruel, they were careless. Every call they had whispered, every document they had signed, every decision made in secret left a trail. Their arrogance had made them sloppy. I clenched my fists, my chest tightening with a mix of anger and determination. I wasn't just going to confront them blindly. I wasn't going to react out of hurt or rage. I was going to be precise, strategic, calculated. For the first time, I felt a sense of control I had never experienced with them. Their betrayal had opened my eyes to a truth I hadn't fully understood. I was stronger than they believed. Smarter, resilient, and capable of reclaiming everything they had tried to take. I began planning in my mind. I would gather every piece of evidence, document every lie, and set a path that would leave them exposed, not just to me, but to everyone who mattered. I would act when the time was perfect, striking not from emotion but from strategy. The fire that had been simmering inside me since that cold birthday text ignited fully. I would not allow their betrayal to define me or dictate my future. I would turn their arrogance into their downfall. And as I stared at the ceiling that night, I made a silent promise. They thought I was powerless. They thought their neglect and cruelty could bury me. They had no idea what I was capable of. Tonight, hurt became determination. Pain became fuel. And from this moment forward, I was no longer just the hurt child. They were about to meet the force of someone they had wronged. This was no longer about birthday neglect. This was about justice. And when I acted, they would never see it coming. I didn't rush. That was the most important decision I made. People who rush give themselves away, and my parents still believed they were untouchable. They thought I was hurt, distracted, licking my wounds after that birthday dinner. I made sure to let them keep thinking that. Step 1, silence. I stopped bringing up the birthday text. I stopped asking questions. When they called, I sounded tired but obedient. When they offered excuses, I accepted them with a quiet "I understand." Nothing disarms manipulators faster than compliance. Their guard dropped almost immediately. Step 2, proof. Every night, I documented everything. Bank statements. Trust fund transfers. Old emails from my grandparents referencing what was meant for me. I requested copies from the bank under the guise of financial planning. No one suspected a thing. My parents had moved money assuming I'd never check, assuming I wouldn't dare. They were wrong. I discovered forged approvals, altered dates, and one devastating detail: they were planning to finalize everything within weeks. Once signed, the money would be permanently out of my reach. That's when the tension started tightening around my chest. I wasn't just racing against betrayal, I was racing against time. Step 3, allies. Quietly, carefully, I reached out to people my parents trusted more than me. An uncle who handled paperwork. A family accountant who had known me since childhood. I didn't accuse. I asked innocent questions. Is this normal? Can you help me understand this? Their reactions told me everything. Pauses. Hesitations. Silence where answers should have been. Step 4, the trap. I let my parents believe I was dependent on them again. I mentioned being unsure about my future. I hinted at needing their guidance. Exactly what they wanted to hear. That's when they slipped. They started explaining things too freely. Confirming plans. Naming dates. Even joking once, "You'll thank us later. You weren't ready for that money anyway." I recorded that. Step 5, timing. I didn't confront them privately. That would let them spin the story. Rewrite history. Gaslight me again. No, this needed witnesses. Documents. Authority. Consequences. So I scheduled a family meeting. Told them I wanted to reconnect. To clear the air. They agreed easily. Smiling. Confident. Certain they still controlled the narrative. They had no idea that every lie they told me in that room would be backed by paper. Every dismissive comment would echo against evidence they couldn't deny. The tension became unbearable in the days leading up to it. Every smile from them made my stomach twist. Every casual message felt like another knife they didn't realize I was counting. They still felt in control. They still believed I wasn't their priority. And that was exactly why the next part would destroy them. Because when people think you're powerless, they stop hiding. And when they stop hiding, they hand you everything you need to end the game. The family meeting took place in my parents' living room, the same room where birthdays, holidays, and "we're doing this for your own good" lectures had always happened. The irony wasn't lost on me. They sat across from me, relaxed, confident. My mother poured tea. My father leaned back, arms crossed, wearing the expression of someone who believed the conversation was already won. So, my father said calmly, "What did you want to talk about?" I took a slow breath. My future. That made them smile. I figured, my mother said. We've been handling things responsibly. You'll understand one day. That was my cue. I reached into my bag and placed a folder on the table. Thick. Heavy. Real. Then I placed my phone beside it and pressed play. My father's voice filled the room. She doesn't need to know yet. We'll finalize it after the birthday mess blows over. My mother's laugh followed. She's emotional. She won't check the paperwork. Silence slammed into the room. My mother's face drained of color. Where did you? I slid the documents forward. Bank records. Trust fund statements. Signed transfers. Highlighted dates. Names. Amounts. Every dollar they had quietly taken from the inheritance my grandparents left for me. You told me I wasn't your priority, I said evenly. So I stopped treating you like mine. My father stood abruptly. This is out of context. That's interesting, a voice said from behind me. They froze. I stepped aside. The family lawyer walked in, someone they had trusted for years. Behind him was my uncle. And behind them, a financial auditor. My mother dropped into her chair. The lawyer spoke calmly, professionally. There are serious irregularities here. Unauthorized transfers. Misuse of fiduciary responsibility. And intent. My father's voice cracked. We're her parents. And that, the auditor replied, makes it worse. Everything unraveled fast after that. Accounts frozen. Emergency legal holds placed. My parents' carefully constructed authority collapsed in real time. They weren't in control anymore, and they knew it. My mother started crying. My father stared at the table, silent, defeated. I stood up, heart pounding but voice steady. You ignored me on my birthday because you thought I was powerless, I said. You told me I wasn't your priority. I picked up the small note I had written that night and placed it between them. If I'm not your priority, then you no longer control my future. I turned and walked out without waiting for a response. Behind me, I heard my father call my name. I didn't stop. They took my birthday. They tried to take my future. Instead, they lost everything they thought they owned. And for the first time in my life, I felt free. Weeks later, the house was quiet, eerily quiet. My parents no longer held power over my life, over my future, or over my peace of mind. Legal restrictions, frozen accounts, and the auditor's reports had stripped them of the control they once wielded so carelessly. For the first time, I could breathe without the weight of their favoritism, manipulation, and deliberate neglect pressing down on me. I had reclaimed what was mine, not just financially, but emotionally. Every sleepless night, every doubt they planted, every text meant to wound me, had forged something stronger inside me. I wasn't just their child anymore, I was my own person, untouchable by their deceit. Friends and mentors noticed the change immediately. Where once I had been hesitant and uncertain, now I moved with quiet authority. They asked how I handled the situation, but I smiled and said nothing, letting my confidence speak for itself. Respect didn't have to be demanded, it came naturally when people saw I could stand tall against betrayal and win. And my parents? Their whispers, their sly manipulations, their casual dismissals, all of it backfired spectacularly. The very arrogance that made them mock me, that made them believe I would cower, had ensured their downfall. Friends, colleagues, even distant family members now looked at them differently, questioning, judging, isolated. The ones who thought they were untouchable had learned the hard truth: betrayal carries consequences. I found myself smiling one morning as I opened the small card I had left for them that night, the one I never expected to see returned. On it, I had written only a few words: if I'm not your priority, then you no longer control my future. It had been the seed of everything that followed. That note, that single act of quiet defiance, had set the stage for justice. To anyone watching this story, have you ever been betrayed by someone you loved? Felt invisible, dismissed, or manipulated by the people you trusted most? I want you to remember this: betrayal doesn't have to define you. It can awaken a strength you didn't know existed. Comment below and share your story. And if you haven't already, subscribe, because sometimes, the most satisfying victories come when patience and strategy meet justice. And for the final poetic justice, they sent a text to make me feel small. I'm not your priority, they wrote. But in the end, it was they who were powerless, while I, once overlooked, underestimated, dismissed, stood taller than ever. The birthday they tried to ruin had sparked a reckoning. And the child they ignored had become the force they could never contain.